In 1932, a modern military deployed heavy machine guns to annihilate an invading force. But the targets weren't human. They were 20,000 massive flightless birds. The military fired nearly 10,000 rounds of armor-piercing ammunition, and they lost. Because when you try to solve an ecological crisis with military violence, nature doesn't fight back. It just outlasts you. This is wild equilibrium. In the aftermath of World War I, the Australian government faced an agricultural crisis. To stimulate the economy, they relocated thousands of traumatized combat veterans to the remote western Outback. They were ordered to cultivate wheat in an incredibly hostile and unforgiving environment. But they were about to trigger a massive ecological collision. By late 1932, a severe drought had devastated the interior of the continent. For these traumatized farmers, the upcoming harvest was their only defense against total bankruptcy. But the drought had also displaced the native wildlife. Searching desperately for water, a biological wave moved inland. 20,000 emus breached the newly established agricultural belt. Standing over 5 feet tall, the emu is an evolutionary marvel designed for survival. They didn't just consume the wheat, their immense physical weight crushed the soil. They systematically destroyed the exclusion fences, opening a massive corridor for tens of thousands of rabbits to flood in behind them. The farmers watched months of labor vanish in a matter of days. Facing total ruin, they bypassed local agricultural authorities and directly petitioned the government for heavy military intervention. The Minister of Defense approved the operation, deploying the Royal Australian Artillery. Armed with Lewis automatic machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The objective was straightforward: a localized extermination. But the military completely misunderstood the dynamics of the natural world. On November 2nd, the artillery intercepted a flock and opened fire. The Lewis gun can discharge 500 rounds per minute. Against human infantry formations, it is utterly devastating. But an adult emu can sprint at 50 kilometers per hour. Instead of clustering together in panic, the flock instantly fractured. They scattered into dozens of erratic, high-speed trajectories, rendering the heavy, rigid machine guns mathematically useless. Days later, when the military attempted to ambush 1,000 thirsty birds at a local dam, the weapon suffered a catastrophic mechanical jam. By sunset, the Australian Army had expended massive amounts of ammunition and confirmed exactly 12 dead birds. The element of surprise was gone. and the flock rapidly adapted their behavior to the sound of gunfire. The commander, Major Meredith, attempted to mount the guns onto moving trucks, hoping to outpace the birds across the open plains. But the rugged outback terrain caused violent, uncontrolled bouncing. The gunners couldn't aim. The emus easily outran the vehicles. The birds had effectively initiated a biological guerrilla war. They organized into smaller squads, posting a tall leader as a watchman, warning the flock the exact moment the soldiers approached. The military operation was rapidly turning into an embarrassment. The emus continued to consume the landscape with absolute impunity. The weapons failed, the tactics failed. Humiliated by the press, the military briefly withdrew. When they returned for a second attempt, the final statistics were staggering. The military had fired exactly 9,886 bullets and killed only 986 birds. 10 armor-piercing rounds were required for every single casualty. Over 19,000 emus remained entirely unharmed. Major Meredith stated they could face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks. The government was forced to surrender the military campaign, recognizing that brute force could not solve an ecological imbalance. They shifted to massive exclusion fencing and localized bounty systems, proving that empowering individual farmers was far more effective than an army. The Great Emu War remains a profound historical lesson. Humanity often assumes that industrial technology can overwrite natural ecosystems. But we underestimate millions of years of evolutionary physics. Nature doesn't negotiate. When forced into a corner, it simply adapts. It alters its patterns. It outmaneuvers our rigid strategies. Our weapons eventually run empty. Our morale eventually breaks. But a biological force just keeps moving. The soldiers left. The farmers remained. And the land bore the scars of a misguided intervention. demonstrating the catastrophic secondary effects of trying to engineer the wild. You cannot shoot your way out of an ecological crisis. Every attempt to dominate the environment with violence only exposes the limits of human power. The birds return to their natural rhythms. Dominating the exact landscape the military swore to protect. A quiet, undeniable victory of biology over ballistics. Because nature was never fighting a war. It was simply existing. And against the raw momentum of existence, humanity will always lose. But far away, another ecosystem was collapsing in silence. Rivers were dying, forests stopped growing, the balance was gone. Then 14 wolves returned. And what happened next shocked scientists around the world. Because these wolves didn't just survive, they rewrote an entire ecosystem.